Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of our American Scouser Podcast. I am Gally, sitting in the big chair today, filling in for Timuchin, who is at some form of one of his daughter's art award shows. I couldn't pick up whether or not she was receiving the award. She knew she was getting the award, but Timuchin is there, which probably means he's making other people uncomfortable. Wishing he was here with... Well, no, he probably isn't actually wishing he was here with either of us. On a day like today, Paul, what a day to be alive and what a day to be a Liverpool supporter. I'd say we have the gamut to cover tonight.
Yeah, it was a long, dusty road on social media today. I got up this morning and I said, nope, not today, Satan, and then proceeded to spend the rest of my day on social media anyway. But I mean, these are the crosses that we are meant to bear, I suppose.
Yeah, and we're going to get to that, and I think, and as always, we're going to start as we always do with greetings from Houston, even though he was second into the shoot today. So good on BJ for finally figuring out a way to beat Allen to the comment section. We appreciate you both very much, as always. For anyone else here new to the program, if you like and share, save, subscribe, we will love you. But if you just want to get engaged, feel free to make comments. We'll bring them up on screen. Hopefully you can be part of the discussion, especially later. As everybody is aware, there was some big news that bombshelled out today. But before we do that, we have to start.
Hold up.
Yep.
I want you to get into it, but we got to do this right, especially because Timuchin's out. Do you put the trivia thing up? Do you have the button? Perfect.
Brother, this was it was actually coming up.
Yeah,
no
there you go.
What.
We got it.
And the truth was, I was going to bring that up to say this is how we start every show, but I don't like to ruin people's time. So we're going to skip over this goddamn segment.
But we're not skipping it. Because Gally, what was the last win Southampton had at Anfield Stadium? Do you know it?
The last
win in the Premier League era that Southampton had at Anfield.
Oh, isn't it the last one that Hasselhouten got when he cried on the pitch during the COVID year?
Nope.
No? Oh, they got that. That's right. They got that win at Southampton, didn't they?
Yep.
Last win they got was the last win that they had at Liverpool, Sadio Mane's last match there. For them when he scored against us?
I think it was before that. I think it was a couple of years before that. Anyway, it was 9 years ago, 2013-14, 1-0. I thought Mane was it 14-15?
Yeah, you could be right. It probably wasn't. Maybe that was a different match. I remember he scored a big goal against us. So they made a big deal about how he always scored at Anfield, basically. Constantly when he played for Southampton. So the last league win for Southampton against us was 9 years ago?
At Anfield.
Yep. Wow. Well, I'll tell you what. I hope and pray that streak continues because that would just be a fitting way to come off of the match we just had on Sunday. And we're going to get to that because I was very impressed at times and then, frustrated at times as we hung on for dear life. But let's not bury the plot talking about the second half before we at least talk about our response to seeing the lineup. So we'll start with you on this one, Paul, where we normally start, right? The lineup is released. What are your initial thoughts? How close were you to it? How far off?
Barring whatever is happening with Henderson right now, this is the best starting 11. So, no major arguments for me outside of Jordo being out. But like I said, that's its own situation right now. So, yeah, I was pretty happy with this. I thought this was probably the best you could have done in a must-win game.
Yeah, I felt the same way. There were a little bit of, I think I had a little trepidation. I think if Spurs were a full side and coming at us with Son and Kulusevski and Kane from the beginning and had Richarlison on the bench to change it late, I would have questioned whether or not we need it more on the bench in case we needed to tactically change the match. But when you see this lineup, to me, this was all about winning this match in the first 45 minutes. And I think it's what they tried to do. Then they did everything they could in the second 45 to give it back. But in that first 45, I felt like this was probably the best 11. I want to start at the back. I think we've been talking about this a lot. We're on the same page here. I thought Konate was immense. I thought he was outstanding. I think he was arguably, you could have made him the man of the match. I think he put in that type of a performance. And they weren't, it's not like Spurs had great success moving forward, but there were times that they looked like they could get behind us. And anytime they did, Konate ran them down. And I think his pace is consistently overlooked when we look at the mountain of a man. I don't think he gets enough credit for how quick he is and how much actual closing speed he has, because he's moving so much girth with him every time he goes. But I thought he was absolutely immense. And I do think you see a more assured Trent when he's next to him. And I don't know that is mental or physical in Trent's play, or if he just knows that he can gamble a little bit more because he has that cover and protection there when Konate's there at the back with him.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably fair. I think Trent probably does psychologically feel a little better having Konate on that side. I mean, we talked about this before. I still think, you look at the three really, really successful windows we had in a row where you've got players like Jota and Diaz that came off firing right out of the window. And we were like, man, like those two players went down as the signings of the seasons across the Premier League. That's how people are talking about that. I think amongst that window, I think Konate is going to prove to be the most important piece out of all of them. I just think from a longevity standpoint and from a fundamental cornerstone piece that you can build on towards the future. We always talked about, him being Virgil's partner. Eventually, I think he's going to be Virgil's replacement, really, in terms of like how this ends up looking. He does get massively underappreciated and probably massively underrated in terms of his overall pace. I think that's because like he's got that length in that sort of height that Verge has, right? But I think he's got longer legs, so it just looks like a gangly mess at times. We always kind of talk. He's got that like bamboo on or that Bambi on ice type thing that we always talked about Sacco having, right? But I think there's a lot more coordination there than we kind of give it credit for. I think he's just immense, and it's got to help Trent for sure. It's got to help the whole back line. I think more than anything, he makes Verge better right now, which is kind of wild when we talk about it like that. But I think like when he's next to Verge looks better. And I just think, at the end of the day, like no slight on Joe Gomez, but like I think that not having Matip and Konate healthy has been huge for that center back partnership, because I mean, we got to talk about last year where for a large portion of the season, Matip was our best center back. And I just don't know if Matip still has the wheels for it, because he's just getting up there in age. But like to have one of those two back like consistently healthy is absolutely huge.
So if there was ever a match to get going early, I felt like this was a prime example of one where you had to show up. And I think in the pre-match show I had said something like, I have no clue what to expect here. You could be 3 up at the half and feel like this game is good night the lights, or you could literally be 0-0 and questioning whether you could break them down. And then, because they were clearly set up to keep that game close to 60, 70 minutes, hope for Harry Kane to do exactly what he did, which was create one opportunity, really good one, and take it. And I just felt the whole time like you really needed an early goal was going to be something that was so important. Mo scores after 11 minutes, the ball gets, the nice forward pass. Obviously, Darwin absolutely knocks the thing down. It's a great first touch by him. He finds, the selfish Darwin that can't do anything but shoot, finds the square ball. Mo will never get enough credit when he scores goals because it does take him maybe 2 or 3 more chances than it does most great goal scorers, right? He'll get 5 and he hits 3, but they're all class. And what he did on that, I mean, the first touch is absolutely sublime, and the second touch is even better, and it's in the back of the net. Do you think we underestimate Mo at this point? Like, he scored in 10 consecutive fixtures, and we're talking about his scoring slump.
I think he's a little bit of a victim of his own success, right? Like, I think we're so used to seeing this, like, this just absolute, like, generational talent. Like, I don't think that people that, like, I think it's really easy to get on this hype train with Liverpool and see this team clicking the way it clicks and not understand that that's not normal. You know, I think the old timers would tell you, like, the old timers will tell you that Mo Salah is one of the greats in this club, like up there with Fowler and Dalglish in like the all-time greats of this club. And I think that we forget about that. I think there's a lot of talk about the contract, which is funny considering that everybody was shouting to just pay him whatever and not worry about it. And then everybody was, oh, it's the contract. Like, you know what I mean? I think, I mean, if you look, it's interesting because I think you can make the same argument for Nunez, who's 22. Like, these guys, like, are they as clinical as we'd like them to be? I don't think any striker really is. But, like, what they do is they create chances in absolute loads. And so, like, it doesn't matter if you're not hitting in this elite percentile. Like, so I'll give you an example, right? Like, to me, Olivier Giroud is one of the most clinical strikers of all time. Like, you give him a chance. You give him a chance and he'll score it out of nothing. You could probably say the same about a player like Harry Kane. Like, those players just put away chances and they don't need a whole lot of them to put them away. But, like, does it really matter? Like, if those players don't, those two players, Harry Kane creates more chances for other people. I don't think you can say that about Olivier Giroud necessarily. No. But what's different with those players is they don't necessarily create as many chances. Like, they don't create chances off just pace. They don't create chance off of vision and off the ball movement as much as like Mo and Nunez will. Like, those are two players that are at completely different ends of their careers, but are very similar in the fact that they don't need to be necessarily clinical to be like elite because they just create so many chances.
Before we talk a little bit more about Nunez, because I do want to dissect his play a little bit here, but before we go into that, you made a comment earlier while we're still kind of on the lineup in our response. You made the comment about Henderson, and I'd like to get your take on this because it's come up in the pre-match show. I think it even came up on one of the morning coffee or tea programs that we do. And for those of you that don't know, Timuchin and a guest of a variety of different guest hosts do a YouTube and Facebook show every morning, 9 a.m. Eastern time, to go over all the day's news. So please check that out and leave comments, give ideas, ways we can improve that. We're really finding it to be a really great way to communicate with some of our viewers and subscribers. So with Henderson, do you think it's just down to fitness? Do you think there's something going on? Because he's been named fully fit and even acknowledged he was fully practicing and not getting into Klopp's side. And I mean, I made the comment during the pre-match show. I know no one liked it because they all think I'm a conspiracy theorist, I think, and I got a tin hat on or something. He hasn't actually started a match for Liverpool since the Arsenal match. And him and Klopp actually had a argument on the pitch after the match. Now, I don't know if that was about what happened to Klopp on the sidelines, if it's about what happened on the pitch and what, in that conversation with Gabriel. Like, do you think something has happened between him and Klopp, or do you genuinely in your heart believe Harvey Elliott has absolutely jumped him in the full depth chart as the captain of the club? I can't go there yet, which is maybe why I'm coming to there's something else going on. Maybe it is a knock. He doesn't look like he's carrying a knock when I watch him play. He looks like Jordan Henderson doing Jordan Henderson things. He just looks like a little bit older version of it. And I'm just trying to make heads or tails of this.
My answer is yes. And I'll tell you why. I think it's both. Because, like, if you look historically at what Jurgen Klopp does, is he latches on to a young talent, right? It was Götze Dortmund, right? I mean, he usually latches on to a young talent, paves the way for them into a starting 11, and is somewhat committed to seeing that player at least reach regular, consistent starting 11 minutes. I believe that player in this side is Harvey Elliott. Now, Jordan Henderson, despite what people have said over the years, I think will go down as one of the greatest Liverpool captains ever. I think he gets a lot of stuff, a lot of shake because he's not Steven Gerrard from a talent standpoint. I think he's a better leader. And I think in terms of what he does inside of a side, I think he's just as important because he's a metronome in the midfield. The ball moves at a completely different pace and a completely different consistency and crispness when he's in there than when he's not. I think there's something to the drama. I genuinely think that there is. I do think that there were words exchanged. I do think that and part of that is because I think I'm in the camp that Jurgen Klopp has run the rails off this team and is asking his team to do things that it's physically not capable of. And I think what happens, what would you expect of a tight-knit team if a manager was doing that? You would expect the leader to stand up and be like, we can't do it. What you're asking us to do, we can't physically do. So don't ask us to do it and then be upset when we can't. And I think that's what I genuinely believe happened. And I believe probably in hindsight, Jurgen will look back and feel differently about some of the things he's done from a tactical standpoint with this side and from a transfer side. And I think when he looks back at it, I think both of these are players and manager. This is a player and a manager. I think that both have a huge mutual respect for each other. And I think that they will have a mutual respect for each other after their careers are over. But yeah, I think that there is a rift there. And I think that is partly to play. I also think historically speaking, Klopp has shown that he kind of picks a youngster. And I think Harvey's his youngster. Hendo's just not a starter. I would add the caveat that he's probably not a 90-minute starter every single week. But I think in your best matches, in your biggest spots, that's who you want in there.
And I guess that's what shocked me about him not starting on Sunday. Yeah. And, that was part of my commentary on the pre-match show was, listen, you could tell me I need Harvey Elliott in this match. I think he creates. I think he offers something going down the right. Then my argument would have been then Jordan Henderson starts over Fabinho on current form, unless there is something else that is going on. They weren't playing the double pivot. We've seen him utilize Henderson at the base many times, so it's not like he's not afraid to put him in that position. And it isn't just because James Milner wasn't available and we needed someone else on the bench. If anything, that was more reason to have your captain on the pitch from the jump, which is what led me to be, question maybe the motive. And I do agree with you. Klopp has always done that. At one point, and we don't want to hear this because I'm not advocating, but at one point, that young player at Dortmund was young Captain America who was coming through and he was trying his hardest to get him into his side. At another point, it was at the beginning of his tenure at Dortmund, it was basically he who gave Marco Reus the keys to become the world-class talent at 20 years old. The crazy part is Marco Reus is the only player who actually didn't leave Dortmund and has stayed the entire time. And continued to build on his own legacy there. So I don't know that I agree with Sparky Parky either. I still think Henderson is a starter in the most important matches. I do think he's necessary for this side. And, maybe this was load management on his legs too, knowing he is going to Qatar and he may not play a lot, but he's going to run a lot in the sun and he's going to spend 3 weeks training on the road. And maybe this is kind of watching the minutes of one of the most senior players he has that is on his way off to the World Cup. So we'll have to see where that goes. Let's talk a little bit about Darwin. I think I described him as a tornado of chaos because I feel like at every angle he went, we lost Paul somehow. So I'll take this on to the monologue at this point. I feel a little bit here like what Darwin does is he utilizes his speed. He utilizes just high-paced energy. More importantly than anything else, I think he causes havoc for defenders in tough spots of the pitch. He uses his speed, which I, for the one, will raise my hand and say was a shocker for me. I watched him a good amount at Benfica. I had no idea he was this fast or this quick. Seen him run down players all over the pitch. More importantly, I think he's starting to figure out the positions on the pitch that are best for him to shoot, the positions that are best for him to pass. Decision making is going to be a huge area of improvement for him, but I think that is that for any young player, whether we're talking about Curtis Jones, we're talking about Harvey Elliott, and I think we can see the raw talent. His half volley shot that Lloris pairs wide is a great save. It should be saved, but that is a very well taken volley or off the half volley. It was heading goalward. I think the couple blocks that Eric Dyer got on him were really, really great. I know he had the time where he took the fullback to the baseline, to the touchline, and, completely kicked it off. I think Paul is back with us now.
Yep.
There he is. Technical difficulties aside from North Carolina. I was just mentioning as I did the little monologue, I described him as a tornado of chaos. He just wreaks havoc wherever he goes. I raised my hand and admitted that I was absolutely wrong about his overall pace. I knew he was quick. I didn't know he was fast. I didn't know he was literally the fastest person this year to play a match in the Premier League, which is crazy.
Yeah, I don't think anyone saw that. Anyone knew that. And we've all seen him in the Champions League, right? I mean, he had great matches against us, and we're like, oh, it looks like a player, I don't think any of us saw that. I mean, let's be honest. None of us really follow the Portuguese league that closely. I dug in after I knew we were linked with him and watched some stuff, talked to some people that I know do follow the Portuguese league. But, I mean, he's just a super raw talent. I mean, and that's the thing. I think anybody who really follows the Portuguese league will tell you that he's basically the opposite of Luis Diaz, where we got essentially a very technically proficient player in Luis Diaz, and we got the opposite in Nunez, where he's got generational type ceiling, but he's still very much raw, and he's got all that pace. I think there's two major things with Nunez that need to be drastically improved for him to kind of hit that next level. And one's that's going to be his first touch. Sometimes he's got two left-handers for feet. And I think that's going to sort itself out eventually. I can tell you that they're just going to throw stuff at him for training session after training session until he starts getting more comfortable. I think that will come with time as he settles into the side as well. I think the other thing is going to be his decision-making, right? And this is really, and I think that's harder than the touch. I really do, because I think that you can train technical things out of somebody, but mentalities are really hard. And especially in a striker who has been relied on at every level that he's played on to carry the weight of his goals, to carry that goal burden for the side, his mentality is shoot first and ask questions later, right? And the side is very much developed to a point where, we have guys dummying runs. We have guys laying off overlaps. We have guys looking at far posts that are open. We have so many different talented offensive skilled players that are making incredible runs to the box. It's going to be very, very interesting to see how that develops. In a weird way, he's kind of got this opposite thing from Harvey Elliott, where when I watch Harvey looks like the kid who's playing in an adult league who's 17 and clearly really talented, but wants all the 32-year-olds to like him a lot, so he makes sure that they have the ball. Where Nunez is has the ball, and he's I'm just going to rip it in from wherever I'm at the pitch, regardless of, without even picking his head up, right? And I think that picking that head up and processing plays will come as he gets more comfortable with the pace and physicality of the Premier League, but it's also just in his DNA as a striker, and that's probably going to be the harder thing to sort out.
Yeah, the decision-making is great. I mean, that was another piece I mentioned, it has to improve. It will improve. It's no different. I think Harvey needs to improve some of his decision-making at times. And to your point, I think it's a really good one. Harvey needs, as much as Darwin needs a little bit of Harvey's, I can be a complimentary player to Mo. Yep. Every once in a while, I want Harvey to play like the kid who was on loan, who thought he was the best player on the pitch. because
there's times where Harvey could take somebody on. You can see
that's why you're there.
Just take him on. Yeah.
I mean, Klopp has got you in there because he believes you're ready to play with these men, not be, the young kid on the pickup softball team. Like, everybody knows that, like, super, men's league softball team that brings in, like, the 18-year-old kid out of high school who was, like, the star baseball player and then gives them wet willies all year long. And the kid the whole time is like, dude, I was hitting home runs off minor league pitchers last year, and now I'm, like, shagging fly balls in this men's league beer league team. But you kind of earn your way in, and then once you earn your way, the thing is they don't want the kid who doesn't feel he belongs. And I think there's a mix there. I think there's a balance, and I think Nunez needs to get some of that. Harvey needs to, Nunez needs to probably give up a little bit of it. Harvey needs to get some of it. And I think Curtis Jones is the enigma of all of it, because he actually genuinely believes not only does he already have it, like, he belongs at the level of Mo Salah and Bobby and these guys. Now, part of that is probably what, I always used to say, the brash and defiant nature is what allows them to be the 1% of the best 1%.
Yeah.
But it's also sometimes what holds them back from actually reaching their maximum potential. And I don't think we'll see that. The other big key to Darwin is, a year ago at this time, we were all screaming, every once in a while, we would like Robo to take a shot when he has a chance. And maybe Bobby could not look to set up Mo on a plate and just shoot when he's inside the box. Now we have a shoot first striker, and it's like, why isn't anyone looking to square the ball to Mo? Right. And I get it. Like, it's so easy when it's not working to complain about all of it. But his goal involvement, his expected goals ratio, his underlying stats are off the charts. His like attempts per, shots on goal per, everything per is the best in the entire Premier League, because
I'll come out and say it just needs time. If you're going to look at the season and your takeaway from like a game like the Tottenham game or even any of the games in the last month, if your takeaway is that Nunez is poor, like, you don't know football. Because, like, I can tell you as a 22-year-old in a foreign country in the hardest league in the world, not speaking the language, he's adapted far better than I thought he would adapt, to be perfectly honest with you. And he was not even supposed to be playing these minutes right now. If Luis Diaz was healthy, he would not be out there right now. And I think that's getting lost in the shuffle a little bit. I just think we've got a lot of people who want everything all the time without being realistic about what the situation is. So I think if anything, we've gotten better than we expected and deserved out of him right now. And I think, does he, we talk about the chaos he brings and how awesome it is. I agree to some extent, but I also think sometimes, like, it kind of throws things a little bit to our,
definitely does,
like, in a negative way, in the way that we play. I think sometimes it's very hard to account for his positioning and, like, where he's going to go, because he's unpredictably chaotic for both teams. Like, you know what I mean? And I think once we figure that out, or once he sort of starts continuing to adjust, I think that will be the perfect storm.
And it's a great point there. I feel like he knows, and we've talked about this before, his best position is on the inside left, right? It's the inside left channel. It's running at those defenders. I think he looks more comfortable playing out on the left in our system than he does playing through the center. I still think eventually his position will be through the center of the pitch for this club. It might be with two up top where he plays on the left-hand side. It might be him up top with like a Carvalho behind him. Heck, who knows? It might end up being what you've been calling for a little bit, Paul, and saying, like, it might be Mo through the middle, Nunez on the left, Diaz on the right, and either Jota, Bobby, Elliott, Carvalho. People forget this too. Jota's greatest time playing in the Premier League was basically playing as a number 10 off a striker with Jimenez their first year up. So Jota can do that role. And there's another one. If Jota and Diaz are healthy, we're not seeing nearly as much Nunez this early in the season. Sparky Parky said best first 45 Nunez has played, and I would agree with him. So let's talk about the second 45 minutes. The response Tottenham had out of the half. You attribute that to us starting poorly in the second half, or Conte being a class manager and getting in the ass of his team a little bit and saying, what the bleep, making a substitution or two and making changes at the half? Who is that more about, us or them?
I think it's about both, because I think it's about Conte's adjustment and our failure to have a plan to adjust to whatever was going to change. I think, like, you go into a half and you say everything's working perfectly, don't change anything. That's fine. But you also have to have the ability to understand that, like, if things are no longer fine, what's our move, right? And I think that there had to have been some sort of in-game tactical adjustment made, and we never made it. We never made it. And I think, I mean, that's hats off to Conte. I thought Kulusevski changed the game when he came in. Like, we were already kind of on the back foot, but him coming in, I think sort of was like the final dagger in like us just – it was like we're hanging on with one hand and he was stepping on our fingers, and I thought he was tremendous, absolutely tremendous. The Harry Kane goal, I mean, you could probably nitpick Ali's positioning a little bit, but, like, look, Kane hits it in the only spot you can hit and score there, and that's what he does. But, I mean, we like, he praised on Konate, and Konate was like a half step slow. Like, he just didn't quite get there in time. But, I mean, that's another striker with a lot of range who's extremely clinical and who's long-legged. And, I mean, it's just a very tough play to defend, period. But I really think that, like, the story for me second half was our inability to make adjustments.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I was really disappointed, honestly, with the overall performance of the second half. I feel like you have to have the killer instinct to go get the third, especially after they score the second. I felt like then it was just like it literally became squeaky bum time, and we just hung on for the last 25 minutes of that match. And I don't know about you. Maybe it's the lack of confidence. Maybe it's, losing to Leeds and Forest and back-to-back weekends. I expected that match somehow to end 2-2 and ruin my weekend. Like, once it got to 2-1, I genuinely did expect that match to end 2-2, even if it was a bad call, a penalty, or something. I just felt like there was just so little positive momentum. But we pull out the win. We get the victory. Yet Klopp goes to the press conference and actually does something he very rarely does, and actually kind of singled out Nunez for some positional defensive mistakes and talked about how much he has to learn about his positional awareness, and specifically talks about him being at fault for leaving space in the goal and kind of leaving Robertson out to dry. Do you think that is – I'd like to say, oh, that's him talking through the papers to get a guy motivated, except the guy doesn't understand the fucking language. So, like, what's he really saying there other than deminimizing to some of our commenters maybe his best performance in a red shirt?
I don't know, man. It's a weird comment to make. The only thing that I can think of is that Klopp is very good at deflecting, and I think that he just wanted to move the conversation along, and that was an easy point for him to pick out was positioning. Why you pick Nunez out of anybody? Like, in this system, talking about your secondary striker, that's just a weird one to me. I mean, but let's face it, what else is he going to talk about? Is he going to talk about the fact that he didn't, change any of the tactics or formation second half? Is he going to talk about some of the head-scratching substitutions he made? Is he going to talk about any of the big things that are real hard questions to answer? No. So, I mean, I think, your new transfer is probably an easy thing to talk about.
Yeah, it's a good point. Before we move on to kind of the rest of the news of the day, any other points to the match, things that stood out to you, any other players you were either overly impressed with or overly disappointed in? Because we've really focused here really on kind of, Mo's quality and, of course, Nunez and Konate. Anyone else out there that jumped out at you one way or the other?
I mean, we talked about it a little bit. I thought Mo had a really, really good game, just in general, on both sides, both offensively and defensively. I thought he was a handful. I thought he was really good. Yeah, to Sparky's point, Jones, but we've talked about this before. Curtis Jones. We're not the people to give an impartial
Curtis Jones conversation, because
I
think me and you would spell it with the O, and we would add the O to that and make sure everyone knew he was surely not enough.
and this is like the midfield conversation, right? I think that Curtis Jones, Oxlade Chamberlain, no fault of his own, and Naby Lad, all fault of his own, I think, need to be gone in January. Like, I mean, those are just three players on wages that we depend on and get zero production from. And the Naby thing's a weird one. I'll just comment on that because I know that's around there. Look, I don't believe that this guy's been injured at all. I think that he got dinged up a little bit at the end of last year. I think he was upset over minutes last year. I think he wasn't named to the Champions League squad, and when he wasn't named to the Champions League squad, I think he officially went on strike. And I think this is a continuous situation. I don't think we'll ever see him in a red kit again. I don't think he'll be back playing any minutes. I think he's gone in January. And I mean, it's a shame because we're finally starting to play some formations I think he'd actually be really good in. He played a 4-2-2-2 at Leipzig, and we played that a couple times. So it just is what it is, man. He never clicked. I didn't think he ever really was able to work on both sides of the ball like we needed him to. I think he's a phenomenal talent. I think he'll be good elsewhere. I just don't think it worked out. And unfortunately, it's going to end badly.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I do think he's on strike. Now, I'll say this. I've been critical of Klopp's. If you're going to credit Jurgen Klopp for his amazing man management skills, someone will need to tell me if you're not going to sell a player when he wants to leave because you don't have a formidable replacement, but there was all summer to find a replacement. If you're not going to sell a player who wants to leave and you're going to force him to stay to try to get the best out of him, how does leaving him off a Champions League roster under any pretense or circumstance help your squad? So if that was a Sacco move, I'm going to lay a marker down here to this club to show them who's in charge and what's going on, and if you embarrass us, we'll, push you out to the pasture, then why not have just let him get his move? Make your $30 million. And again, This comes back to constantly losing players for free and me having a real problem with the fact that we don't manage our assets. But the match was great. We pick up our 3 points during our Premier League show. We'll look at the table this week. So we wake up this morning, and it's the Champions League draw. And I can't lie, I kind of forgot. And I was laying in bed, and I think it was Mike Martin in our group, in our Discord channel. And if you're not in our Discord channel, send us a message and get involved if you want to get woken up by people asking you who's watching the Champions League draw at 6 a.m. And it made me go, oh. So I literally click on the video and I start the video. And as I started, I'm not even kidding, the guy pulls out the Liverpool ticket. And I rolled over to Kelly and said, well, I'll guarantee the next name is either Real Madrid or Bayern Munich. And literally he's like, and they will play Real Madrid. And I was like, you fucking sons of bitches. Because honestly, I would have rathered stomach a week worth of Sadio Mane posts from the new Bayern fans that are in all of our social media channels, then I think I would stomach actually having to play Real Madrid twice.
There goes the conspiracy theory from our good friend Nick Paquin on just the good teams getting through to play each other at the end.
Yeah, exactly, because that didn't exactly come up here. Dave Leslie clearly finds this commentary hilarious and or thinks I'm crazy, in which case I will tell you, Dave, both are true.
Just imagine you could join the Discord channel and get this shit at 6 a.m. unsolicited.
Yeah, I mean, I got to be honest, it was brutal, but we're going to have plenty of time between now and February on this podcast to talk a lot about that matchup and what it means for us, right? And I think that clearly we get our chance at revenge, right? We get our opportunity to take them over 2 legs. I do feel like we're better equipped to beat a side of that quality over 2 legs than we are in a one-off final, because I think in a one-off final, greatness can overtake. And, in the first one, it was literally Gareth Bale scoring 2 of the most worldy goals, and then the ridiculous mistake. And we lose Mo early, so there's just everything wrapped up in one. And we talked about it last year. They had one of the single greatest performances of a goalie in any one moment ever. And if you give a player of Vinicius's talent a chance like that, he'll bury it. And he did. And they were deserved of winning that cup last year, you know. I just, what I look at this as, when you look at this draw, of all 8 of these, which one are you most excited to see, and which one do you think actually brings the biggest chance for either upset or drama?
So if I was a neutral, I would say Liverpool or Real Madrid. Like, I mean,
yep.
It's like almost one of those things where it's like you wouldn't cast this in a movie, right? Because it's not believable. Like, and that's when like we always get like the conspiracy theories because it's just too fucking good. The storylines are too good here, right? I say if I'm looking for an upset out of this group, it's tough because a lot of these teams I think are pretty even across the board. But like, if I'm looking for an actual upset, I mean, I'll go Leipzig. I know they're not having the greatest year, but like over 2 legs, I think anything can happen versus City in the Champions League. And if I'm looking at any of these other matchups, to me, there's not like heavy favorites going up against any scary teams, in my opinion. A lot of these are pretty. Like, I think Napoli is arguably the best team in all of football right now. I think Tottenham, Milan will probably be pretty even. Club Brugge played their pants off in the group stage. You never know what's going to happen with that in Benfica. Benfica's off to a fairly good start this year. Inter's not what they were last year, neither is Porto. PSG and Bayern are 2 heavyweights. So it's like, I mean, those 2 fixtures at the top to me are the interesting ones. Just in terms of, I think Leipzig traditionally can punch above its weight, and Manchester City is always able to punch below their weight in this competition.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think the top one is the sexiest of all the ties. I do think the repeat and the rematch of the final of 2 years ago or 3 years ago between PSG and Bayern, that has to be a big one, just from the sheer volume of the names. Yeah. The fact that
legendary clubs.
Both of these 2 clubs' entire seasons are judged upon how they do in this tournament at this point because they walk their domestic leagues. So, you know, that's really interesting. Plus, it is an absolute like juxtaposed position of tactics and style, right? You have the Bayern giants, you have the PSG oil money, you have Messi and Neymar and Mbappe, and then even though Bayern is as great as they are, it's not Lewandowski anymore. It's not even really Thomas Muller's team. It's Serge Gnabry and Sadio Mane and the young Musla kid. I mean, such talent all over the pitch. That one's really interesting for me. What I say surprised me the most here, and I didn't even realize it till this morning, I think it shows a little bit of a change. You know, we've talked about this in the past. 4 teams from the EPL making it to the round of 16 does not surprise anyone. It's happened, I want to say 4 or 5 of the last 6 years. 4 teams out of Germany does surprise me a little bit.
Yeah.
And lastly, 3 teams out of Italy should shock everybody in Italy because they usually struggle in this tournament. And I think to your point, you know, Napoli, Milan, and Inter could all get through. And on the betting line, they might actually be favorites. Mm-hmm. And if Italy ever had 3 teams in the quarterfinals, they would lose their mind. And then they would have to pinch themselves and realize that Juve's cheating asses aren't one of them. And they would be even happier to find that out, right? We're talking about teams like PSG and Bayern walking the league. And Juve is literally in the Europa League playing in some freaking playing game. And those of you that are out there, the conspiracy theorists in the world, just go take a look at the looks on the faces of both the delegate from Barca and the delegate from United when they pull their names up and say that they have to play in a playoff round to get to the knockout stages of the Europa League. I honestly couldn't have been happier.
You know what else would be good in this group? I'll tell you what would be good. I'd like to see one leg with Pulisic on Dortmund and one leg with him and Chelsea and see what happens. Or since he's probably not going to play anyway, just have him announce both legs, like as a color commentator.
Well, first of all, anyone who is an American who's ever heard him speak knows we want no part of the color commentary, because that shit would just put you to sleep, because he is as boring as the day is long. I say it all the time. American soccer needs a personality. And, well, it sure as hell ain't him. Like, I don't like Tyler Adams' game overall, but I have to raise my hand and say I've been absolutely shocked at how well he's taken to the Premier League. Yeah. And he deserves all the credit because he always said he wanted the Prem move, and he's made it. But, give me Weston McKennie all day if I need the personality of an American soccer player, because he actually seems like a guy I'd want to have a beer with. Christian Pulisic reminds me of the guy who literally would be like asking about like who's cleaning his boots tonight and like, what the after match meal is when the rest of us are trying to figure out who's throwing the keg party on Friday night, and he's thinking about like the training table because he's already hurt. Timuchin,
he strikes me as a dude that has like monogrammed koozies and croquis. You know what I mean? Oh,
no question. Probably has his own, definitely probably like has his own like customized like cornhole setup in the backyard with like his own face on it or something, like just sure. Absolutely.
Probably plays like bocce ball and shit like that.
Yes, look at us. So Timuchin chimes in. Couldn't make the podcast, but he chimed in. Proud of Paul Bickler. Someone literally messaged me to tell me you guys did trivia.
Yeah,
and by Bickler of all people. Layla's winning an award here, but Bickler deserves one as well.
Yeah,
so
he's not really doing family stuff. This is probably just my semi-annual review.
Pretty much, probably is. So we will absolutely get back to the Champions League between now and February. And I thought we'd leave more time for this conversation. I'm actually happy we didn't. We have 10, 12 minutes, so we will try. But we would be remiss to be a Liverpool talking show and not at least give our input and or opinions on the news of the day. And it's not often that a big 3 points and a win against the top 6 rival wouldn't be top news. It's not often that who you're going to play in the Champions League, let it alone be the fact you're playing the title holders in Real Madrid, be top news. But then, about 8.5 minutes after the draw got concluded, David Ornstein drops this, bombshell on the football world. Liverpool have been put up for sale by Fenway Sports Group. Sale deck has been produced for interested parties. Goldman and Sachs and Morgan Stanley assisting in the valuation process. Unclear if deal gets done, but FSG inviting offers. And I will say, here, I do want to acknowledge there is something awkward about this photo. They use it all the time. And for whatever reason, it looks like Klopp is sort of holding hands with John Henry while John Henry is holding his wife's breast in front of the cameras. And it doesn't make sense. But then again, if my wife was 45,
it doesn't help that John Henry looks like the crypt keeper in this picture.
I was just going to say, it doesn't help that she looks young enough to be his granddaughter, let alone his daughter. But then again, if my wife looked like that, she would probably be everywhere with me. I mean, wait, Kelly, you do look like that, and you are with me everywhere I go. Whoops, dead. So, Paul, before we go into the who's and the whys, initially, what was your response when the first report came out, before clicking on the article, before even thinking it through? What were you thinking?
It was just more like like a really like primal what? Like I was just like I didn't really fully process that because the headline is so aggressive. Like it's so Liverpool put up for sale. Like they're just out the side of the street. Like they're on the fucking curb with the sign.
They got a sign up says
for sale.
Buy my club.
Buy now or best offer. It just it was so aggressive. So yeah, it was a little bit like my first initial thought was this can't be right. And then I clicked into it and it was more along the lines of this can't be right. Because the wording of the response doesn't insinuate anything about a majority ownership transfer. It just talks about additional shareholders, which is literally this could have been the headline 5 years ago. I feel like we did this 5 years ago. And, I know that they have aggressively looked at wanting to acquire teams across Europe, very similar to what Manchester City does. That's going to require spending power to just go up against sovereign nations. PSG, Newcastle, City requires that. So, to me, it just looks like they're trying to pull more funding. I do think there's probably some merit to, look, they've been in conversation with Goldman Sachs for a while now. They've been getting advice for years from them. So my thought was they continue to have this conversation with Goldman Sachs. They come back from the valuation, the number's higher, and they're like, oh, well, and then Goldman Sachs was like, would you consider selling? And they were like, if we got, I think they would need, the 4 billion number keeps going around. Chelsea just sold for 5.2. I think that Liverpool would go for more than 5.2, given the market.
But the 5.2 is a fake number because that included the 2 billion that they weren't paying. They actually paid 3.8 billion. That included the 1.4 billion that was owed to Abramovich that he wrote off in loans. So the actual sale price of what they actually put up in cash and capital was 3.8 billion. The price of the sale was the unforgiven loan portion. So I question whether 4 to 4.25 billion. Listen to us. We're talking about whether or not we'd sell something. Actually, at what time do those goddamn Powerball numbers come out? I'm going to find out.
And this is the only time we get to talk about $1 billion. Okay, let's just let it rip, Gally.
I think where I have trouble here is there were 3 different reports in the last year that the club was up for sale. 3 different types of reports like this, none of which substantiated by anyone as in the know as David Ornstein. And the fact that David Ornstein actually put his name on this and beat everyone to it lets me think there's a little smoke to this fire. Now, I'm with you guys. I actually believe this all started as them looking into getting more investment into the club. But I also believe they are solid business people, great business people. And I think any good business person worth their weight, is going to look at all options. And the only thing also that's not in this statement that's on the screen is nowhere in here does it say that the club is not for sale. And the other 2 times that they've been rumored to be selling the club, they have unequivocally said our club is not for sale. And then here they say all the right things except for we're not selling the club. Now, my other part to it is it's very rare that the other local mouthpieces chime in, right? We know, Dave, that James Pierce used to be tied in. We've talked about, we're not even going to mention the Instagram model on this podcast because it doesn't warrant the time or the space. But these are attributed to Pierce getting run at by people telling him that basically Ornstein was a joke. And, one thing is when a journalist puts their name on something and they're an actual journalist, and David Ornstein is a very good journalist, maybe the most informed journalist in English football, there is some credibility. I'm sorry, there has to be. And the fact that the Globe started running the stories they did, the fact that James Pierce is even acknowledging it has been knocked back multiple times in the past. They have clearly asked bankers to figure out what the value of the club is, whether that's for partial or full sale. They're doing things that they've never been open to talking about doing. At the exact same time that they're seeing their products slightly diminish on the pitch and on the field. And, as a Red Sox fan, I've watched what they do. And when they take over a business, they almost act as if they are a hedge fund, right? They almost like they're they are really a wealth management company. They invest in the infrastructure of the business. It's not just what's on the pitch. It was the practice facility. It was the 2 new stands. They increased revenues. They decided not to build a new stadium, both at Fenway and at Anfield, after making the first proclamation that they would build a stadium. And at some point, they are going to cash in. This isn't a group who is ever going to pass this down to their son or their daughter or the next generation, or maybe his, 35-year younger wife. Linda Pizzuti isn't going to be running this club after the Crypt Keeper, takes his final steps. So at some point, the value only gets so high and you start to diminish returns. And there are a lot of reasons right now that say that the value of this club may not get much higher, especially if they believe that they're going to struggle. Now that Arsenal is back towards the top of the table, Spurs are putting money in, have $1 billion stadium. They're going to continue to invest. And now you have Newcastle coming in, and you already have City, and you have United back, whether we like it or not, coming back closer to respectability than where they were. So maybe they do look at this and say, to all the reports coming out of Boston today and coming out of some of the Washington papers, that they have made inquiries into possibly buying the Washington football team. I still can't call them the Commanders. I'm sorry. They've always wanted to own an NFL team. They have made it very, very clear. I've said this before. They cannot stand the Crafts. They are like the Hatfield and the McCoys here in the sports world. They don't get along. And I think they've always wanted that NFL team. And I don't think they have the financial wherewithal to buy an NFL team without selling some of their assets. So I'm not saying this is legit, but I'm saying there is some smoke to this fire. And if the right deal comes in, I think they will sell. At the same time, I don't think we have anything to worry about, because I don't think they're going to ever sell to a sovereign wealth fund. I don't think they will ever sell to, even to a Mike Ashley-like despicable owner. I think they would vet out owners that they felt comfortable with. And I do believe if they could, they would stay involved with it. But I think the fact that they're talking minority or majority, and it's multiple reporters on both sides of the pond reporting this, I feel like as Liverpool supporters, it's kind of unrealistic. It's like half the group hates the ownership and wants them out, and the other half the group wants to defend them like they would never sell. Like this is all great. Like, to me, that if it is true what was reported today, I don't see anything wrong with their process or what they're doing. Do you, from a business standpoint?
No. And I mean, I think that's the thing. Like, the more we talk about, like, they would entertain the prospect of more minority shareholders, right, to continue to roll funds. Like, we did that with Redbird. Like, how sustainable is that before it's no longer a majority share? Like, you can't only do that a couple times with sizable investments before you're no longer the majority, because it's all been sold off. So I think, like, it's not a sustainable model in terms of like continuing that. So, and I think you're right. I mean, like, look, let's face it. Like, when we get down to the brass tacks, when we get down to the actual nitty gritty of like what FSG is to a Liverpool supporter, they are loved or they are hated. I wouldn't say loved. They're probably either respected or hated. And I think when we look at Liverpool supporters that don't support FSG, that don't like American owners in general, I think there's a natural distrust for Americans. I accept that for what it is. But I think people universally across, if they're being honest with themselves, I think that they like how things have been done. They don't like why things have been done, because they don't like the fact that this is a business consortium that essentially manages their things like a portfolio. And I, for one, love that, because I don't have anyone who manages my shit like a portfolio, which I need, because like they will always look out for the best long-term interest of the club. They manage risk reward. They want to strengthen from within. And I think ultimately they're very much like Mo. I think their success has been their downfall, because like the numbers, they bought it for $300 million and now it's $4 billion. They're going to walk away. I'm like, look, you can't be FSG out. And then when they sell, criticize them for making a profit, because they fucking made that profit. They reinvested into the club. They assembled arguably the greatest starting 11 of all time. They redid the grounds. They extended the stadium. They renovated the stadium. They made all the pieces of the club have value that didn't have value before it. That's how you get from $300 million to $4 billion with success. And like, you can't sit here and argue the results, demand a sale, and then criticize them for being successful. Like, it doesn't.
And that's where I come back to. I mean, I think this speaks to, and I don't want to go open this can of worms, and we're going to wrap this thing up here in a second, but I think this speaks to, in some ways, why they were willing to gamble with the emotions around the Super League. I think without the Super League in their mind allowed them guaranteed revenue to compete with the other powers that they can't compete with. And one thing I will say, they don't like finishing second. Take a look at the Boston Red Sox over the last decade. They've basically either won the World Series, finished second, or finished dead last, because they developed a process that once they started spreading their assets around, they couldn't just keep dumping money into the Red Sox like they did in 03, 04, and at the beginning when the run started. Now, they've won 5 World Series titles in 20 years after the club waited 100 years to win one. And there isn't a single person sitting here in New England that says a negative thing about them other than the tickets are too much and they don't love the fans as much as the old owners, and they don't. Oh, wait, but they win. And listen, there'll be a day when they're no longer the owners of Liverpool Football Club. I hope it doesn't happen soon. And I think we will miss them. And I think as a whole, the club will miss them. But this whole holier than thou mentality that either they're money grabbing Americans or they're cheap as shit, there's got to be some middle ground that just calls them smart. Like, and that's the part that drives me nuts. And I think I hate it that you're either they're liars, they got to go get me Arab money, right? Which is disgusting and wrong all in itself. Or it's the opposite. It's they never said this. They're just looking for investment. This reporter is looking for clickbait. News flash, people. Reporters don't write headlines. That's not their job. Their job is to actually report what they're hearing. And this guy is citing sources from inside the club and inside the financials. And the Boston Globe stories, those sources are coming from inside FSG. The guy owns the Globe. Like, there is something here. I think they're still the owners come next summer. But if the right offer comes in, I won't be shocked to hear that they're planning their exit out. And we'll end it with this whatever looking trophy comes back up to the coffers and we get to make a move to try to retain it. Do you give 2 shits or do you roll out the 19-year-olds on Wednesday seriously to have less matches to play in January when football matters again?
Nah, last year was the year we cared about the cups. I don't care this year. Roll the kids out, man. I don't care if you're rolling the ball boy out there.
I'm not kidding when I say this. I would literally start Ramsey. I would start the 16-year-old dope kid. I would start the Polish Prince. I would start I don't even know I'd risk Kelleher. I might play Adrian. And anyone who's listened to this podcast knows I would basically rather play Big Red in goal than Adrian. Okay? My goal with
we got a Brazilian kid for a goalkeeper. Let's get him out there.
My whole reason of rolling out Adrian is I think it honestly assures us the best chance of being eliminated from this cup.
Well, it also pulled the average age of the squad up over 20. Just that one player.
I'm serious when I say it. I genuinely, I've never hoped that they would bow out of a cup more. I don't think we need any more matches in December or January. It's going to be an absolute shit show as the League Cup goes through. It's going to be 3 more midweek matches, and they are playing 2-legged ties in the semifinals, which is just asinine. I can't believe they haven't scrapped the replays in the 4th round or the 5th round of the FA Cup. Like, we're going to literally play football till June, and God, I hope by then this football team looks like the football club last June and not the one from this season. Well, Bickler, it's been fun as always. Everyone, please, thank you for your comments, all of your questions. Like, comment, share, bring a friend, let them know about it. If you'd like to join our Discord, reach out. If for any reason you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, what are you waiting for? Get on over YouTube and search for American Scouser. You will see all of our ugly mugs all over the place. You can go ahead and subscribe. You'll get automatic updates, our Monday pod, our Thursday pod, the fantasy show, the EPL show. And for all of us here at American Scouser, thank you for watching, and we will be back with you Thursday night.